The city was alive that evening, its streets buzzing with hurried footsteps, car horns, and the chatter of people returning home from long days of work. Among the rush, a young man stepped out of a sleek black car. His polished shoes hit the pavement with purpose, his tailored suit a symbol of success. This was Michael, a man admired by many, envied by some, and respected by all. But on this night, his life was about to take a turn he never could have imagined. As he crossed the street, his attention was suddenly caught by a fragile figure slumped against the wall of a closed shop. It was an old beggar woman dressed in rags, her frail hands trembling as she clutched a small torn blanket. The world passed her by, blind to her suffering, except for Michael. At first he thought she was just another face in the shadows of the city. But when she tried to stand and collapsed to the ground, his instincts overpowered his hesitation. He rushed forward, kneeling beside her. "Ma'am, are you all right?" His voice was urgent, his hand steady as he tried to lift her. The beggar's eyes fluttered open, her lips moving weakly as if to whisper something. A name, perhaps, or a prayer. Michael froze. Something in her voice, soft yet broken, struck a chord deep within him. He didn't understand it yet, but his heart raced with a strange familiarity. Without wasting another moment, he picked her up carefully, her frail weight hardly matching the heaviness of the moment. The people around them stopped to stare, some murmuring in surprise, but Michael didn't care. He hurried toward his car, determined to get her to a hospital before it was too late. And yet, even as he drove with urgency, glancing at her pale face resting against the seat, an unsettling thought refused to leave his mind. Why did she feel so familiar? Her features were aged, her body weak, her clothes torn, but there was something undeniable in her eyes, something that pulled at a buried memory. He believed he was saving a stranger, but destiny was already writing a cruel twist, for when the truth revealed itself, it would not only shake his world, it would break his heart into pieces. Michael had built a life many would envy. To the world, he was the image of success. A sharp businessman, a man who walked into boardrooms and commanded respect, someone who had climbed from nothing to everything. But behind his polished smile and neatly pressed suits lay a story few ever knew. A story of abandonment, questions without answers, and nights spent staring at the ceiling, wondering why. Michael was not born into privilege. In fact, he didn't even know the full story of his beginnings. What he did know was that his earliest memory was not of a mother's embrace, nor of a father's guiding hand, but of a crowded foster home where children fought over blankets and scraps of food. He had been told vaguely that his mother had left him, though no one ever explained where she went, or why. Some days he imagined she had died, taken by illness or accident, and that the world had been cruel enough to leave him behind. Other days, when anger burned hotter than grief, he imagined she had abandoned him deliberately, walking away, leaving him like something disposable. That wound never healed. He grew up among strangers who came and went. Some foster parents were kind but temporary. Others were cruel, treating him like an obligation. But through it all, Michael clung to something inside himself, a belief that he had to make it, that he had to prove to the world he was worth keeping. By the time he was a teenager, he had already learned how to work twice as hard as everyone else. While other kids wasted their summers, he took odd jobs, cleaning, delivering newspapers, waiting tables. Every dollar earned was not just money, but a brick in the foundation of the life he was building. In college, he pushed harder. Scholarships carried him through, and long nights of study were fueled by more than ambition. They were fueled by longing. He longed for answers, for family, for the voice of a mother who had never tucked him in at night, for the face of a father he had never met. And yet, no matter how high he climbed, there was always a hollow place inside him. Friends noticed it sometimes. The way he avoided conversations about childhood memories, or how his smile dimmed when people spoke lovingly about their parents. Michael had learned to mask it, but he couldn't erase it. To strangers, he looked like a man who had it all. To himself, he was still the boy standing by the window of the foster home, waiting for someone who never came back. And on that fateful night, when he carried the frail beggar woman into his car, that hollow space stirred in a way it hadn't for years. He didn't know why. He couldn't explain the strange pull in his chest, but deep inside he wondered if fate had finally decided to answer the questions he had carried his whole life. For sometimes the past doesn't stay buried. Sometimes it returns, in ways we least expect. The city at night could be merciless. Bright lights hid dark corners, and laughter often drowned out silent cries. That evening, Michael walked briskly down the avenue after a long business meeting, his mind preoccupied with contracts and deadlines. Yet something tugged at his attention, a small commotion at the edge of the street. There, against the cold stone wall of a shop, sat a frail beggar woman. Her clothes were little more than torn rags, her hair tangled with dust, her hands trembling as she stretched out an empty palm. People passed her as though she didn't exist. Some looked away in discomfort. Others smirked in disdain. A few young men even tossed cruel words her way, mocking her for daring to ask for mercy in a world that had none to give. Michael paused. He didn't know why. Hundreds of times before he had seen the homeless scattered across the streets, and though he often gave money or food, tonight felt different. He watched as a woman in heels muttered, "Pathetic," and stepped around the beggar without a second glance. A man shoved past, nearly knocking the frail figure to the ground, and then, with a weak cough, the beggar tried to rise, only for her knees to buckle beneath her. She collapsed, hitting the pavement with a dull thud. For a moment, the world kept moving. The crowd flowed like a river around her, unwilling to stop. But Michael's feet were no longer his own. Before he realized it, he was running. He pushed through the indifferent crowd, his heart pounding, his breath sharp. "Hey! Somebody help!" he shouted, his voice cutting through the noise. But no one came. Kneeling beside her, Michael placed a hand under her head, lifting it gently off the rough concrete. Her face was lined with exhaustion, her lips cracked and pale. Her chest rose in shallow, uneven breaths. Michael's stomach tightened. She was slipping. "Stay with me," he murmured. "Don't give up." Her eyelids fluttered open for the briefest moment. Her gaze, though clouded by weakness, met his. And in that instant, Michael felt a jolt, as though some invisible thread had connected them. The woman tried to speak, a whisper escaping her lips, but the words were too faint to understand. Michael swallowed hard. He didn't know her, and yet the idea of walking away was unthinkable. Something deep inside him, buried beneath years of loneliness and unanswered questions, screamed that he could not let her die. Carefully, he lifted her into his arms. She was impossibly light, as though life itself had already drained from her. The crowd parted slightly, staring in surprise as the well-dressed young man carried the ragged beggar through the street. Some whispered in shock, others scoffed, but Michael ignored them all. He reached his car, gently laying her across the back seat. His driver turned, startled. "Sir, who is—" "Just drive," Michael ordered, his voice tight. "To the nearest hospital. Hurry." As the car sped through the streets, Michael sat beside her, holding her hand. It was cold, fragile, the hand of someone who had endured too much suffering for far too long. He kept his eyes on her face, willing her to keep breathing. He didn't know who she was. He didn't know why her presence shook him so deeply. But one thing was certain. He could not let her go. He believed he was saving a stranger that night, but fate was about to reveal that he was saving a piece of himself. The sharp smell of antiseptic filled Michael's lungs as he pushed through the hospital doors, the frail beggar woman cradled in his arms. Nurses rushed forward, pulling her onto a stretcher, their faces tightening as they examined her. "She's severely malnourished," one doctor muttered, already checking her pulse. "Dehydrated. Weak heart. If she hadn't been brought in now—" His voice trailed off, Michael's jaw clenched. If she hadn't been brought in now, she would have died. Without hesitation, he pulled out his wallet. "Do whatever it takes. I'll cover all expenses." The staff exchanged surprised glances. A man in an expensive suit paying for a dying beggar. But they didn't question him. Within minutes, she was wheeled into emergency care, leaving Michael in the waiting room, pacing like a restless storm. Hours passed before a nurse finally emerged. "She'll live," she said softly. "But she's weak, very weak. It'll take time, nutrition, and care." Michael exhaled, a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. Relief washed over him, but so did confusion. Why did he feel so tied to her survival? He didn't even know her name. The following days blurred into a strange rhythm. Michael visited every morning before work, and returned every night, no matter how late. He sat beside her bed, sometimes in silence, sometimes speaking softly as though she could hear. When she stirred awake, he was there with water or a spoon of soup, coaxing her gently to eat. Her hands trembled, but he whispered one evening, adjusting her blanket, "You're safe now. And then one night as she slept fitfully, Michael heard it. Her lips moved, her voice weak and broken, but the words pierced him like lightning. Mikey. Michael froze. The sound echoed inside him, dragging him back to a memory buried deep. A tiny boy no older than 4, clutching a toy car in a crowded foster home. A woman's voice calling him softly. Mikey, come here, my love. His heart pounded in his chest. No one had called him that in years. No one but... He shook his head, trying to push away the thought. It couldn't be. She was just a beggar, a stranger. But then why did she whisper his childhood nickname as though it belonged to her? Michael had spent his whole life searching for the face of the mother who left him. And now, in the quiet of a hospital room, a dying woman's fragile voice threatened to shatter everything he believed about his past. The pull inside him grew stronger with each passing day. He didn't want to admit it, but a truth he wasn't ready to face was already unfolding before him. Days turned into a week, and slowly the frail woman in the hospital bed began to recover. Her skin regained a touch of color. Her voice grew less brittle, and though her hand still trembled when she lifted a spoon, the spark of life returned to her eyes. Michael was there through it all. He told himself he was simply doing what any decent man would do, helping someone in need. Yet the truth was harder to deny. He felt tethered to her, as though some invisible bond had tied their fates together long before that night on the street. One afternoon, as the late sun filtered through the blinds, the woman stirred awake and began humming softly. Michael, sitting beside her, froze. The tune was faint, cracked by age and weakness, but unmistakable. It was a lullaby, a simple, tender melody. The very same one Michael remembered from his earliest years. A song he had once believed he had imagined, because no one in his foster homes ever sang it. He had carried that tune like a ghost memory, humming it to himself when loneliness cut too deep. And now here it was, spilling from the lips of a woman he barely knew. He swallowed hard, his throat tightening. It can't be. The next day, as he helped her sip warm broth, she whispered, I once had a little boy. Beautiful eyes. A laugh like sunshine. Michael's chest constricted. She closed her eyes, her face shadowed with grief. But I lost him. I searched until I could no longer stand. Life broke me. A tear slipped down her weathered cheek. Michael's grip tightened on the bowl. His mind screamed at him to stop listening, to dismiss her words as the ramblings of a weary old woman. But his heart refused to let go. That night he sat awake in his apartment, staring at the ceiling. Her words echoed in his head. I once had a little boy. I searched until I could no longer stand, and then came the memory, faint but undeniable. A woman's voice calling him by his childhood nickname, Mikey, as she lifted him high into the air, spinning him until his laughter filled the room. He had buried that memory for years, dismissing it as a dream. But now the pieces began to align: the lullaby, the nickname, the story of a lost child. Michael pressed his palms against his eyes, his chest heaving. No, he whispered into the darkness. It's not possible. She abandoned me. She left me. She doesn't get to just appear like this. But doubt was already eating at him. Michael had built his life on the wound of abandonment. To believe that the woman lying in that hospital bed might be the very mother he had longed for, hated and mourned all at once, was a truth too heavy to face. Yet fate has a way of unraveling secrets, thread by painful thread. And as he returned to the hospital the next day, Michael knew one thing. The answers he had chased his whole life were closer than ever, and they terrified him. The hospital room was quiet, the steady beeping of the monitor the only sound. Michael sat in the chair, his hand resting on the edge of the bed as the woman, fragile yet slowly regaining strength, stirred awake. She turned her eyes toward him, eyes that carried both exhaustion and something deeper, something familiar. Michael, she whispered. He stiffened. No one here had told her his name. I heard the nurses, she said quickly, as if sensing his unease. But there was a tremor in her voice, a slip that didn't quite convince. That evening, as she fumbled through the few belongings the hospital had salvaged from her, something small and metallic slipped onto the bed. Michael reached out instinctively, and his fingers closed around it. A locket. Old, worn, its gold plating chipped with time. He clicked it open. Inside, behind a foggy pane of glass, was a photograph. A little boy, no more than 3 years old, smiling wide, his hair tousled, his eyes bright. Michael's breath caught. The face was his. He stared at her, his heart hammering. "Where did you get this?" His voice was low, almost trembling. Her lips quivered. Tears welled in her tired eyes. "Because you are him, my boy, my Mikey." The room fell into a suffocating silence. Michael felt the ground shift beneath him, his chest tightening as though the air had been stolen away. He wanted to shout, to deny it, to throw the locket across the room. But deep inside, a part of him had always known. "No." He shook his head violently. "No, you left me. You abandoned me. I was just a kid and I cried every night for you." "Where were you?" His voice cracked, the rage spilling out with years of buried pain. She wept openly now, her frail body shaking. "I never wanted to leave you. I was young, powerless." "Your father—" She broke off, clutching her chest as if the memory still clawed at her. "They took you from me. I searched, Mikey. For years I searched until I had nothing left. I lost everything, even myself. That's why you found me on the street." Michael pressed his fists against his temples, torn between fury and a desperate yearning he couldn't control. "Why didn't you fight harder? Why wasn't I enough for you to hold on?" Her voice was a whisper, raw and broken. "You were always enough. I was the one who wasn't." In that single moment, Michael's world cracked open. The beggar woman he had saved was no stranger. She was the very person he had hated and longed for his entire life. His mother, his blood, his unanswered question. Michael stood, pacing the room, his chest heaving. Every instinct screamed at him to walk away, to close the door on her forever. Yet when he turned back, he saw not a monster, not an enemy, but a fragile woman, broken by years of suffering, clutching the same photograph he had once wished he still had. Tears blurred his vision. His voice dropped soft, almost a whisper. Why did fate bring us back together now?" She reached out with trembling fingers, barely grazing his hand. "Because maybe it's not too late," and for the first time, Michael didn't pull away. The silence in the room was heavy, filled with everything words could not yet say. Grief, anger, longing, and the fragile thread of forgiveness waiting to be woven. Michael's voice trembled as he finally let the question spill out. Raw and unrestrained, "Why did you leave me?" The room seemed to freeze. The beeping of the monitor filled the silence between them as she turned her weary face toward him. Her hands clutched the blanket tightly as if holding on to the last scraps of strength. "I didn't leave you," she whispered. "I was forced to. Your father, he was cruel. He said a poor, helpless woman like me had no right to raise you. He had power, money, and I had nothing. They took you away, and when I tried to fight, they beat me, threw me out. I searched for you, Mikey. Every day I searched until the streets became my home." Michael's chest rose and fell rapidly, fury and sorrow colliding inside him. "Do you know what it felt like? To grow up in strangers' houses, to look at every face and wonder if they could be mine, to ache for a mother's voice I couldn't even remember clearly." His eyes glistened. "You weren't there. No matter what you say, you weren't there." Her tears rolled freely now. "I know, and that is my punishment, one I carry every second I breathe. But you must believe me, I never stopped loving you. Even when the world left me with nothing, I held on to the hope that one day somehow I would see you again." Michael turned away, fists clenched. The weight of her words pressed heavily on him. All those nights of loneliness, the bitterness, the emptiness, could they truly be explained away by her suffering? This was the moment of truth. Would he hold on to his pain, or open his heart to the woman who had broken it? Forgiveness or rejection? His choice would decide not just their future, but his own peace. Slowly, Michael turned back. His face was wet with tears, but his eyes softened. He moved closer, kneeling by her bedside. "I don't know if I can forget the years you weren't there," he said quietly. "But I can't ignore what's in front of me now. You're my mother, and I won't let you suffer anymore." Her breath hitched as he gently took her frail hand in his. For the first time, a smile, fragile but real, curved her lips. "My son," she whispered, as if the words themselves were healing. Michael rested his forehead against her hand, tears streaming freely. "You don't have to search anymore. Resolution. I'm here, perfect, and I won't." Nor was it painless. But it was a beginning, a fragile bridge built over years of loss, sorrow, and longing. And in that moment, both mother and son found something they thought was lost forever: hope. The hospital room was quiet now, but the silence carried a storm of emotions. A son had finally found his mother, not in a warm home, not in the embrace he had once dreamed of, but in the fragile form of a beggar who had carried her own scars for decades. Would you forgive a parent who abandoned you if you discovered they suffered even more than you did? Michael's choice was not simple. His heart carried both love and pain. Forgiveness had begun, but the questions remained. Is love stronger than betrayal, or are some wounds too deep to ever heal? As Michael sat beside her bed, a new unease stirred within him. How had a woman who once had a child, a family, and a home ended up starving on the streets? Who was responsible for pushing her into such misery? The camera lingers on Michael's face, and determined, conflicted, and restless. He looked at his mother, frail yet finally at peace, and whispered a vow only he could hear. I'll find out what really happened. Perhaps this reunion was not the end, but only the beginning of a darker truth waiting to be uncovered. Somewhere out there, the people who destroyed their lives may still walk free, and Michael's journey is far from over. If you were in his place, what would you do? Would you cling to forgiveness and build a new life? Or would you search for the hidden villains who turned your family into beggars? The story lingers in the mind, a blend of heartbreak, hope, and unanswered mysteries. Tell us in the comments. Would you forgive, or would you seek the truth behind the betrayal? Your voice matters in this journey. Don't forget to like this video if it touched your heart, share it with someone who believes in the power of love, and subscribe to our channel, because the next chapter may reveal secrets no one could imagine.